Hey friends, welcome back to the Big Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Tricia Brouk, founder of the Big Talk Academy, award-winning director, producer, and author, and this is episode 461. This week, I am super excited to welcome back Jason Van Orden. Jason first joined me on the podcast in 2017 in episode 128. Be sure to check that out too. Jason helps authors, academics, and speakers turn their expertise into new streams of scalable income and a business model that amplifies their work. His mission is to help visionaries with impactful ideas to connect with the people they serve best and the problems they can most uniquely solve. All right, everybody, let's do this. Jason, I am so excited that you have joined us today on the Big Talk for the second time. Welcome to our show.
Yeah, hi Tricia. Thanks. Yeah, it's always a pleasure to chat with you.
You were with us in August of 2017. And for everybody who's listening or watching, that was episode 128. And we are more than 400 in. So I'm so glad that you joined us then and that you're joining us now. And before we go on, let's start with your backstory. When I open a script, before I even read the entire script, I'm thinking about the backstory of the characters. And I'd love to know if you could share with our audience and our listeners, what's your backstory and how did it lead you to this moment with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Here's what I like sharing about my story is that there are breadcrumbs that I can see in reverse, right? So I'll share some of those breadcrumbs, and my hope is that some people might resonate with that. And like, yeah, I totally had an experience kind of like that where I went in an unexpected direction. So my story, very quickly, is I was an engineer for 3 years. Figured out I'm not meant to work for somebody else. I either wanted to go teach or be a musician. I was very serious about my music at the time. And so I started learning about marketing actually as a musician. Needed people to buy my CDs and come to my shows. And that's where I figured out I actually kind of like marketing and I'm pretty good at it. So that was, like around 98, 99, early on in the internet, so to speak. And then I ended up through a little bit of a circuitous path in real estate investing. I finally just had to quit my job as an engineer, couldn't do it anymore, had met a bunch of real estate investors that dove head first in. And, I probably was very naive at the time. Now thinking back, it was a very bold step to take because it's not like I had things rolling already, but that's when I became an entrepreneur for the first time. And that was in towards the end of 2003. Working with real estate investors, what actually stood out for me there was that a lot of them started asking me marketing questions. Like it wasn't as much of a fit for me, the deal making and everything, but they loved talking to me about like, how can we find buyers and sellers using direct marketing? And so a light bulb went off for me. Again, I loved teaching. I'd had the opportunity to do that as an undergrad, another little breadcrumb from my past. And I thought, well, what if I do a 1 day workshop where I just give a brain dump of all my marketing know-how? And so I did that, and I did a snail mail campaign actually at the time. This is like 2004. I had a very small mailing list, filled the room, made $8,000 in a day, and a light bulb just went ding. I'm like, oh, I just got paid well to teach. And I knew I didn't want to go to academia because that was just going to be another organization or bureaucracy that I wasn't going to fit into myself. So here I am with this course now. I had recorded it. I had it on CDs. I was burning it on CDs and making a 3-ring binder. And I was going to mail it, sell it locally, and then start selling it through the mail. Well, eventually I went to the internet trying to figure out how can I sell this on the internet. And this is 2005. So no YouTube, no social media or anything yet. And this word podcasting shows up in an email that I received. And I typed podcasting into Google because I was curious, and Google tried to correct me and said, "Did you mean fly casting?" I was like, "No, not a fisherman myself." So I kept digging and eventually found these really geeky blog posts about how you podcast. And the engineer in me loved the tech background, and the teacher in me saw the potential, and the marketer in me saw this potential, and the musician in me knew how to use the audio aspect of it. And so I was like, this could be a really good fit, and this is something new I could see myself really enjoying being a part of. So I took a leap. I said, I think I'm going to try to brand myself as the business podcasting guy. So I launched a tutorial site, and it got picked up by Google and started getting some traffic. I guess Google had figured out in the meantime what podcasting was. And I started getting traffic to this website because I made this very clear, easy to follow tutorial. So eventually people started asking me for speaking gigs and writing books and things like that. And concurrently, I'd started a podcast with a friend of mine just for fun. It was the first podcast about internet marketing and internet business. We were just sharing our experiences online as two guys who'd left their job and were trying to make it as entrepreneurs. And it did really well to our surprise. We had top 10 business show in iTunes for many, many years. And we started building an email list. And eventually they started asking us, do you coach? Do you teach? Hey, the show's great and inspiring. Now guide us through the steps. And so I started digging back into my teaching and started launching courses. And then, fast forward the next 12 years, I had an educational company for entrepreneurs for those 12 years. And then I needed a change. It just wasn't doing it for me anymore. And I went on a little bit of a search for a couple years, but to shorten up this story and end it, I decided, you know what? It was fun working with beginning entrepreneurs. Now I want to use all this knowledge that I've picked up over the last, couple decades now, and I want to help those existing experts who know they have some kind of message, some kind of story or methodology or just something they want to get out there in a bigger way. And so that's what I've done for the last few years is helping coaches and consultants and practitioners who are in a one-to-one business model to go into a one-to-many business model where they're doing online courses and other things, working with more people at a time, reaching a bigger audience. And that's what I love doing is helping people just like you do as well to get their meaningful message out there in a bigger way.
That's amazing. And for everybody who's listening, I've worked with Jason, and the way he works is extremely succinct and direct and dialed in. And if you need support around marketing or moving from one-on-one coaching to one-to-many coaching, definitely we'll put how to find Jason in the show notes. But he is your person. I love that you have been able to support people, and you've actually grown along the way as well. And you've always listened to that inner voice of what do I want to do? What am I being called to do? What am I being inspired to do? How did you give yourself permission to listen to that inner voice and continuously rebrand and re-strategize and take yourself as an entrepreneur through the journey of all the bumps, ups and downs?
Yeah. So this ties in well with that theme of the breadcrumbs, because at each of those breadcrumb moments, I mean, I told a very condensed version of that story, right? But sometimes there were months of like, okay, is that I don't know, doubting if this is the right. But to answer your question, if I look back at those moments, what did I do? Certainly, one thing is I learned to trust my curiosity. I believe my curiosity is one of the ways my intuition speaks to me. I think it's probably the same for a lot of entrepreneurs and people with ideas. And sometimes it's not clear why my curiosity is, drawing me in a certain way, but at the very least, I'm going to enjoy that. And then I'll end up bumping into something. So following curiosity has always served me well. And then being willing to experiment, starting that podcasting site when nobody knew yet what podcasting was, starting that first show with my friend when we had no idea it was going to take off and become a popular show, being willing to leave that business when the time came because it just wasn't fulfilling me enough, even though my identity was tied up in it and it was my means of making a living, right? And so it was hard to but being willing to do little experiments, whether it's launching that tutorial site and seeing what happens, launching the podcast with my friend, seeing what happens, just finding a way to put the idea out there. And the wonderful thing is on the internet, you can put it out there and hopefully immediately get it in front of somebody you can start getting some feedback. So curiosity, following my curiosity, experimentation has always been a big one. And then in those moments of uncertainty, just trusting, thinking back to the times where it did work out for you when you went towards uncertainty and realizing it's like, you know what, I can figure this out. And if it doesn't quite go how I hoped, I'll pivot and go in a new direction. So drawing from the past to bring self-efficacy into the present essentially is another key aspect of that.
That's so amazing. What has given you the confidence and courage to put something out there, not knowing if it's going to be well received?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully it has gotten easier over the years because I do remember when I launched that first podcast, I put a lot of pressure on myself. I'm thinking NPR and stuff that I had listened to, and then like, I can't do that. I'm not even qualified. And it, I decided to make it fun for myself for one, because I think if you can figure out how to make it fun, and that's part of the curiosity thing, but if you make it fun, then that starts to counteract a little bit some of the weight and having to dig into your willpower and whatever to move forward. And then you can always start small as well. It's like I have, I mean, even today when I maybe I'm a little more used to putting something on LinkedIn and just seeing what happens. Sometimes I still have my times when I'm like, I don't know, is this really gonna? But I know the people that I can turn to and say, hey, can you take a look at this and just see what you think, and give me some feedback. So feedback loops are incredibly important, and I'd put it right there with that experimentation. Is I like going to online courses, which is a big thing I help with now, like launching a pilot course just quickly, and getting a few people in there and seeing how it goes and getting that iterative feedback to improve it. You can do that whether it's, hey, I want to write a book. Okay, what if I wrote a smaller white paper or something around that and got it out there in a smaller, just to see how it goes. So piloting things and knowing where or who you can turn to for the kind of feedback that you need in a moment to gain that validation, even if that's what you need in that time, but also the feedback to improve, to go bigger with it then as time moves forward.
I love this part of your process. And I know this about you because I've known you for a long time. So I know that your process is to create a feedback loop and to try things and to improve them and try them again and put them in front of people. And I think that's such a powerful part of how you are in integrity with your voice. Can you dig deeper into that for our audience?
Yeah. Well,
Because
first I would say,
it's unique to you, Jason. It really
right,
is.
right, and I'm glad this theme of voice is really one that I think about a lot, and it's really important. So okay, so let me say this is like, I think of voice as, here's why voice is important, and then I think this will help lead into how I've found my voice. So when I tell my clients, whether it's related to content creation or making a course or just putting themselves out there, the people, your audience that you're trying to reach, they need to see relevance and resonance. So relevance means you're addressing a top of mind pain, need, want, unfulfilled desire that draws them in and goes, oh, it gets through that spam filter of the mind that's, they're batting stuff away from their attention all day long, and gets them to stop for a second, goes like, actually, I am dealing with a lot of anxiety lately. Maybe I'll read this article that's promising that's a new way to deal with anxiety, right? That's relevant. Resonance is, as you start reading that about anxiety, the person reframes the way you look at anxiety, or therapy, and there's something about the way that they make you feel or think, and their values are infused into what they're writing about, and you see similarities between yourself and them. So that's where the likability and things come in. So we want resonance and relevance. So the answer to that question is just learning, like, okay, well, what are the things that are me, part of my personality, that people enjoy? I'll give you an example. Even recently, I geek out on space a lot. On my other monitor over here, I have a picture of Neptune right now. I'll sit in my backyard with my telescope looking at stars. And so I'm following that stuff a lot. And a few weeks back, I was really excited because there's this new telescope we have called the James Webb Telescope, and it's going to change astronomy and things. So I wanted to, but that's not what my audience, they're not looking at me for astronomy news, but I wanted to talk about astronomy news. So I came up with this way to talk about how they had to align the telescope 18 different mirrors, and it was taking them a couple months once they got it out there to align and set it up. And then I talked about aligning your voice and your business, and I brought it back around. And there was a comment on that. One of my friends was like, Jason, you're delightfully nerdy. And I was like, yeah, you know what, I'll take that, thanks for that. And I'm like, yeah, that is one of the things I lean into, is I love bringing my nerdiness, whether it's this statistic or science or thing I delved into here. I've learned that people know that, hey, if Jason is talking about something, it's because he's thought about it and probably done a bunch of research to state a thing. So again, through feedback loops, seeing how people comment, what they respond to, or even sometimes asking them, like, what do you know you can depend on me for when it comes to, help and content or whatever. And that's where, I've learned these things. Like, I mean, that's just one example, delightfully nerdy. So I embrace that, and I infuse that in, and I go ahead and say, yeah, you know what, if I want to talk about Neptune next week, I'll figure out a way to talk about Neptune. I'll make it relevant and valuable, but it's also going to be me. And, that includes talking about my daughter or the garden that I'm trying to grow in my backyard right now. So you put yourself into it through experimentation and see what people respond to. That's what the processes look like for me. And I don't know, sometimes it probably falls flat, but sometimes there's that thing that people just latch onto, and you can tell that they're vibing with it. So it's like, great, how can I double down on that?
What's resonating so deeply with me right now, Jason, about what you're saying is that you are giving yourself permission to talk about your daughter, talk about your garden, talk about space. I'm sure you've also spoken about music. I've heard you play. You're extremely talented. And that encompasses who you are and your voice, and should not be separate from who you are as a coach or a marketing expert.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, people that are in my audience, some of them are parents. And so sometimes even just a little mention about my daughter, like, oh, Jason's a parent too. Or I had a LinkedIn post where I mentioned, my daughter, and I think it was something about her resilience and a lesson I learned from her. Or no, it was, I had jumped in too soon to fix something with my daughter. And so I was just telling a story about that and saying, often we do that in marketing. Like, we just jump in, like, I got the solution, where we need to empathize with the pain first. And just that little mention of my daughter, and in fact somebody commented like, oh, it's so nice to have that little glimpse into your personal life, right? And I'm not like, it was just one mention in the article, but that sticks. Yeah, that stuff sticks in people's minds, and like, oh, I have a sense of who Jason is, what he values, how he parents just a little bit. And those are all things that add to that connection, even though they're coming to me for business and marketing, or business and marketing tips.
Right. When you're working with clients, how do you distill their voices in order to create a marketing plan for them?
Yeah, so what I do first is I figure out what matters to them behind their message. Um, there's a lot of research that shows that consumers want to do business with purpose-based businesses. And on a larger scale, we could think of like a Patagonia or Whole Foods, or companies that make decisions based on values as opposed to always the bottom line, which you could argue are one and the same. But anyway, so I bring that up to say, okay, well, what does that mean to have a purpose-based business? And I think a lot of the people who become coaches, consultants, speakers, authors, clearly they have a purpose. But then the question is like, well, what's behind that? And how do you communicate it? So then I started breaking that down into 5 different areas that you can then infuse into your messaging. So, for instance, one is um, beliefs. Like, what do you believe that's fundamental to what you're putting out there in the world? An example for me is, yeah, I'm teaching online courses and marketing, but the fundamental belief behind that is we've got a lot of really smart people out there with a lot of great ideas. And the more we elevate that, the more we're going to solve the problems in the world. And thankfully, the internet enables that. And unlike 20 or 30 years ago, where we were beholden to big media, big organizations for all of the things to influence us, now it's like you can find that exact person with the right perspective that's for you. And that's a belief that I have that's important, that elevating those voices, right? Along with that, a second area, so beliefs, contribution. It's like, okay, well, what's the contribution that you want to make to the world that's bigger than just your business? Well, for me, it's, well, if I can help create a more critical mass of good ideas, diverse ideas getting out there in the world, I feel like that's going to improve the world, in addition to hopefully make a living for me at the same time. So contribution, beliefs. Another one is reasons why. And so that's different than the other two a little bit. This is, why do you do what you do outside of the transaction of business, but that still benefits you? It's not contribution, which is not about you. Reasons why is it's about you. So for me, it comes back to curiosity. Actually, I love ideas. I love bumping into new things. So in addition to the money I make, I enjoy associating with my clients because I get to bump into interesting ideas all the time. And so I let, these are the kinds of things that I put into, and there are a couple other ones. And I can actually tell everyone where they can get a document that'll walk through this with questions to help you dig this stuff out. But then once you have established those things, you slip it into your content. You put it on your about page. You put it on your work with me page. And this is that resonance stuff, right? It's like, okay, Jason can help me make online courses. Well, there are probably 20 other people that could do that as well. But it's like, oh, Jason has this vision about how my online course will affect the world and why it matters to him. Oh, that I like. And so that draws in towards purpose, and back to that research of this is what consumers these days want, is to choose to do business based on that.
You're elevating everyone's voice, including the consumer that has yet to know this product exists. It's pretty powerful stuff.
Right.
Amazing. What are you working on currently that is elevating the voices of your clients?
Yeah. Well, right now, it's actually very relevant to that question. I have my mastermind and I have my workshop. It's like, here's how to launch an online course. But something I keep bumping into with a lot that I help my one-on-one clients with, but I keep seeing a lot of other people needing help with is messaging. Just this stuff that we're talking about. There's so much you have to write and create and put out there in a clear way that gets is seen as relevant, but then in a way that's resonant. And how do you do that? What does that look like, all the way to the granular level of like a 15-second elevator pitch, or an about page, or a nurture sequence of emails that people automatically get when they first sign up for your list. So right now what I'm thinking about a lot is how can I make more and better frameworks to help with messaging. And then I think I'm going to experiment by doing a little workshop or something and see how that's received. But this a lot of people get hung up on that. So I'm like, well, that could be really useful. A workshop where you come in, you learn these frameworks, you apply them, and you walk out with this list of specific things that you've probably been wrestling with and like not happy with. You're like, yeah, my LinkedIn bio is just not quite how I want it to. Great, we'll fix that, right? We'll get all the so like that's what I'm thinking about now. And I love thinking in terms of frameworks because they're you can reuse them. They're based on principles, but they leave that layer to allow for the strengths and values and vision and goals and circumstances of the person using the framework. So anyway, yeah, this topic about messaging and resonance is everything. That's what's on my mind right now that I'm working on next, to help those who work with me.
I love it. And I have this experience with speakers. They don't know how to say what it is they want to say. They know they want to impact the world. They know they want to get on big stages. They know they have a personal story. And when they are in that place of not knowing how to say what they want to say, they're in complete paralysis. And then guess what? The audience never gets to hear from them. And that is a
Right.
shame. So I love that you're able to create these frameworks around people who need to dial in their messaging, because that's really the storytelling and the voice. And you're, again, I keep going back to this, you give voice to others all the time in the work that you do.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, that goes into the underlying why. I mean, I'm one of many people teaching online courses, and also online courses are one of many things that I could do with my skill set. But everything really that I have done, even that last business and everything, it does fall under a heading of like giving people voice and freedom to share what they want to with the world in a way that feels good to them. And I just happen to do that through online marketing and online courses right now. But I love doing it for all the reasons that we talked about.
Yeah. You also believe, I believe you believe in community, because I've been in your community and you've invited me to, I'm not sure what you call them, a mastermind day workshop. You invite people to come in and support one another. And that's one of the favorite things that I love doing, is when
Hmm.
you invite me to do that, I'm always a yes, because it's structured. You give us an opportunity to ask for help. You give us an opportunity to provide support for our colleagues, and you moderate it. And it's one of my favorite things ever. When did you start and why did you start doing that?
Yeah, this is a really great example of the stuff that we've been talking about. So, about a year and a half ago, a friend of mine, Michael Roderick, who you know as well, and I, in the middle of COVID, we are like, hey, we want to do something together. And we wanted to give people a way to, meet up when it was hard and there were no conferences and meetups and things. And so as an experiment, we just started putting together these networking events, but we wanted to try to make it something more meaningful. Like we had found, hey, go beyond just the, what do you do? What do I do? How can, more like, I found that networking works best when I figure out who are the people I really feel attracted to just getting to know and associating with, and I enjoy, right? So that's what we focused on, was giving people an opportunity to meet people and get to know them. And that started going really well. And so then I started doing the mini mastermind thing, which you've been to. Like, okay, what if I also bring people together in these smaller groups? And it's basically a way for them to see, well, here's a taste of how Jason coaches and facilitates, and the kind of people that Jason brings together. And so, that's led to clients for me. It's led to opportunities for, teaching for other people's organizations or programs, and so forth. So I mentioned both of those examples because, and this is also something I'm working on right now, this idea of connection platform. So we hear a lot about content platform, and as an expert out there, you got to have your content platform. Maybe it's a combination of speaking, and you're on LinkedIn, and you've got an email newsletter and a podcast, and those all work together strategically as your content platform. Well, connection platform is how do you bring people together, and how do you give people opportunities to connect with each other in association with you and your brand, or give platform to other people. So, it's been really fun to see a year and a half or more into running these networking things. It just comes back around, and the opportunities it brings for me. And I just got an email today, someone saying, oh, I had a fantastic interview with somebody I met at your networking thing. And, so that's just, it's a great way to find potential clients. It's a great way to bump into new opportunities. If there are certain kinds of people you want to build your network or deepen your network with, that just choose to be the connector, create some little thing and experiment with it, and try different opportunities of bringing people together in a meaningful way that provides value. And now you've got a connection platform, and then you can even integrate that in with your content platform as a part of the customer journey. Because there, like I said, a number of clients that I work with today have come through networking thing and then a mini mastermind. And then they end up going, hey, Jason, tell me more about what we could do together. And then, and I end up having a client. So that's actually part of my customer journey as well. So that's what that's all about. And another thing I'm making frameworks on and thinking about, hey, I'd love to teach that, because it's worked really well, and it's worked really well for some of my clients as well.
That's amazing. And I also want to thank you and Michael for continuing to invite me to those networking events, even though they're at 8:00 at night and I'm always a no.
Right.
I
Yeah, we try to
appreciate
accommodate as many schedules as we can, but it's not always
Yeah.
off.
Thank you for that. Are you ready for fast talk?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. What's your favorite book?
Oh my goodness, I have to choose one. Man, if you ask me to choose one, I immediately freeze up. Okay, so here's one that comes to mind in terms of business. One of my favorite business books is not a business book. It's called Nonviolent Communication, and it basically is a framework for empathy and figuring out the needs of somebody else in a situation. And really, that's good marketing and sales. Is you got to figure out what's the need at the core of the thing that you're trying to communicate, right? So that's been very impactful in my, at least as far as business goes, is nonviolent communication.
Amazing. Who is your favorite speaker and why?
Yeah, my favorite speaker. Recently I've been listening to a lot of lectures by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I might have had a different answer a year or two ago, but again, space theme, right? And I was just, think about, he does such a good job of taking these scientific things and making them accessible and
Mm.
even fun. Like, he knows how to be funny and light and sometimes just a little self-deprecating or whatever. And so it just brings all these people and then everything's like also just science based, and like, hey, this is what the science shows is best for human progress. And he's all about that bigger thing of human progress. It's not just science and space and stuff. It's like, this is about progressing humanity, that we understand these things. And so he's somebody I've really been enjoying, not just for the information that I get, but also just thinking about at that meta level, like, what is it he doing, and why is he, there are a lot of physicists, but he's like a celebrity physicist. So how does a physicist become a celebrity physicist? By being a good speaker and teacher in the way that he is.
So true. I love it. How do you memorize when you're speaking?
Oh my goodness. A lot of rehearsal and I mean a lot of rehearsal. But when I say that, sometimes it's just like I'll be on the plane on the way to speak somewhere, and I've been through the presentation a couple times, and but I'll just in the theater of the mind, as they say, visualizing can do a lot. So sometimes I'll be on a bike ride, just running through it in my mind. It's not a wholesale substitute for actual practice and rehearsal as well, but um, practice and rehearsal, but in adding in that extra element of visualization, which makes it easier to find time to reinforce it.
Without question, that's so much part of my process as well. And what do you do to prepare before you speak, whether it's on stage, a podcast, or a virtual event?
Yeah, so the first thing that I do is the first thing I do with just about anything in my business, and I just bring to mind, who is this for? Who is the person that's going to take this course? Who is the person that's going to hear this presentation? Who's the person that's going to be listening to this podcast? Who am I creating it for? Who am I delivering it for? And then it comes back to the needs thing. It's like, okay, so what is it that what's top of mind for them, so it'll be relevant? Like, how do I make it relevant? So I need to speak to, well, I know a lot of people are struggling with messaging lately and stuff. So, and I've got this great framework, so I'm going to bring that in. Okay, cool. But then I got to make it resonant. So then I start, okay, what are some stories I could tell that they might relate with, whether it's a story of being stuck in a job I hated as an engineer, and a lot of people relate with being stuck in a job they hate, or and bring that in as well. But once I have that person in mind, it's a lot easier then to start picking the elements, as opposed to just thinking about the topic or simply what I want to say. I mean, of course, I want to get some of that in there as well, but it all starts with that.
Amazing. And what podcast are you currently obsessed with, Jason?
What podcast am I currently obsessed with? I've actually haven't listened to a podcast for a couple of months because I've been listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson's book. No, but most recently there was a podcast. I mean, this is going to be so that mental health is an important topic for me, especially mental health and entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are challenged by mental health issues at a higher rate than even the average population. So, along those lines, there's this one called "Stuck, Not Broken."
Mm.
Justin Sinceri, I think, is the name of the host, and he gives this really great breakdown of something called the polyvagal theory, which is just basically how our nervous systems work, and how understanding our nervous systems just help us regulate ourselves, heal from trauma, improve our mental health and our well-being, create a sense of safety in our lives so we can thrive. So anyway, it's been a really interesting one that I mean, that's probably the last one I was like binging through, particularly because I wanted to learn more about the nervous system as it relates to mental health. So yeah, that's a good one.
Amazing. We'll put all of those in the show notes, everybody. Jason, thank you so much for being a featured guest for the second time on The
Hey.
Big Talk. Where can our listeners get in touch with you? And I want you to share that PDF with all the frameworks and the special gift, along with any information on an upcoming workshop to test out your connection platform.
Oh, awesome. Wonderful. Okay. So, magnetic messaging.download. That's a web address. Type in magnetic messaging.download. And that is the one where it has the 5 different areas of the purpose of your work and your message, and questions to help you bring that stuff up. So you have the building blocks to then plug into your content and so forth. So magnetic messaging.download. And then, yeah, if you're interested in checking out the networking events or some of these other connection platform things that I do, I'd say just go ahead and email me, jason@jasonvanorden.com, and would love to chat with you, and then invite you to whatever I happen to have coming up at the time. So jason at
Amazing.
jasonvanorden.com.
Amazing. That will all be in the show notes. Be sure to follow, get in touch with Jason. He is incredible and will be able to help elevate your voice when it comes to your messaging and your business. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We so appreciate you giving us your time here at the Big Talk. And remember, your voice matters. Big love, everybody.